Hello guys, I am back from another video and today it's about what if Deku was the only boy with a quote-unquote quirk. So, in the last video we talked about after the whole incident in the training camp, the League of Villains have finally captured Izuku, as they would basically bring him towards his room. The next day comes as Shigaraki would basically tell some of the League of Villain members to basically, tie up Izuku even though he's basically weakened, thanks to not having some blood from, from Ida. So, when Izuku was asking for some, mana from somebody, at least somebody, because he didn't know that he was captured by the League of Villains yet, and so he would basically, get some blood by the help of, Shigaraki. By, Shigaraki basically putting some blood, or at least some of the blood from Ida into a glass of water, and then she would basically, chug the piece of water, not like actually drink it, as she would basically force it down Izuku's mouth. Everybody was just confused, knowing that, Shigaraki isn't the forward type, including Konagiri. But after she did that, she would basically go to leave to basically finish up her game. So, everybody was basically wondering what they're gonna do with Izuku, but one of them specifically, Toga, being the yandere as she is, would decide to maybe try and, jump his bones and maybe even, and probably even, drink some of his blood, obviously. So, while they were waiting, they would see the door open as they would see All For One. All For One is now wearing some sort of gothic Lolita type outfit and wearing a half mask, not showing her, mouth and, basically her lower face. Her upper face almost seems almost angelic. She also seems to have, whitish hair. As she would basically introduce herself to Izuku, as she would basically ask him if she wants to, marry him. If she wants to marry her. Izuku was completely confused, and also, what? Also, for the rest of the League of Villains, they were also, completely taken aback, including, Shigaraki. Because Shigaraki kind of has a crush now, ever since that, whole incident in the mall. So, yeah, after Izuku refused, she would basically force him to basically, force him to marry her. And after a while being, slapped around, Izuku would comply. The reason why he's being slapped around is because he doesn't have enough mana to basically, do any feats of strength yet. Or at least, for now. Anyway, so, after she brings Izuku back to his room, he was forced to stay there for about a week. And then one day, she would decide to maybe try and, have some fun, if you get what I mean. And so, she would basically, unconsensually, force, Izuku to have, his first time with her. So, yeah. So, after, Izuku basically took it away the, V card of, All For One, because at the time, she didn't really have anybody to, love at all, because she believed that nobody was worthy of, having her as their first time. But Izuku did. So, after Izuku was rhymes with grape, because this is unconsensual. So, after doing that, she would basically ask for Izuku to have round 2. And so, that is basically what happened last episode, or at least a shortened version. And yeah, so, let's talk about what happens next. Oh boy, this is completely fucked up. So, we go back to the heroes right now. So, some of the heroes currently are trying to find Izuku. As currently with, with Hawks, because remember, Hawks is currently working with the League of Villains as a spy. And then, when one day she was basically going around the, League of Villains base, she would overhear that, All For One is planning to marry someone, which, was some great information. But it turns out that it was Izuku, so she would basically report it back to some of the, heroes. After, oh boy. After some of the, Hero Commission hear this, the Hero Commission would basically ask if it was consensual. She would basically, tell them that it was unconsensual and even Izuku was forced into it. Apparently, the reason why is because, All For One was forcing Izuku to do it because if if he doesn't, marry her, well, he's going to, she's going to kill everybody that she, loves, including his, well, his, sister and also his best friend, aka Bako, and his master, you know, Ida. So, after the, Hero Commission hears about this, they would basically tell, Hawks to tell everybody about this in Class 1A, and also some of the heroes as well, including Ida, because that's completely important, because remember, Ida is Izuku's master, so it makes sense that she needs to hear about this. And when they do, oh boy, this is a complete shitstorm. Yeah, let's just say all of the Class 1A members currently, they were pissed at All For One for basically, telling Izuku to basically marry her. And for Bako, she was even more pissed when she was, told that, was threatened that if he doesn't marry her, well, let's just say all of them are going to be killed by her. So Bako felt angry that she didn't, save him, and so wants to take All For One down. And as for, well, wait for a sec. And as for Ida would felt, a bit, happy about, Izuku trying to save her by basically sacrificing himself, but she's still, completely in love with him, so it makes sense that she wants to, take down All For One for daring to try and steal her man. And as for, Izumi would be, quite concerned because having his sister-in-law being, I don't know, the number one hero of fucking Japan, not really the number one hero, I meant the number one villain of Japan, well, that would be concerning. So she would basically tell everybody, or more specifically, Hawks basically tells everybody to basically get ready because they're gonna stop this wedding. Because apparently they're gonna have the wedding in about, I don't know, about 1 week. So yeah, everybody's basically getting ready to, stop this wedding from ever happening. Because, remember, all of them, except for some of the heroes like All Might over there, and, yeah, they're completely in love with him. Not including, Principal Nezu and things of that sort. So, yeah. So, currently we go back to Izuku right now. Izuku is being, being measured, not in that way, not in, not a dick measuring contest, not that way, but it's more like, measuring for, Izuku's, wedding suit. And as for All For One is basically in another room, basically getting her measurements for her, wedding dress. As Izuku's basically thinking in his mind, this is the best thing, I guess. I mean, at least I'm safe, or at least I'm protecting my friends and my master, including you, Bako. But he would basically start to cry a little bit, as the tailor would say this. Oh, why are you crying, young master? Are you perhaps pretty happy about marrying All For One's son? As he would say this. Oh, yeah, I guess you can say. Izuku would start to cry even more, this time on the inside, feeling that he was, betraying them, and felt even more angry that he was, basically unconsensually, forced to have some no time with her. So, yeah, wait for a second. So, after Izuku was basically thinking in his mind, Izuku would hear the sound of the tailor basically saying, Hey, hey, as Izuku would basically look up at him as he would say this. I'm done with your measurements. Now you can just leave. As Izuku would say this. Oh, yes. Izuku would basically start to leave with a guard, specifically, Dabi. As Dabi is basically, bringing him back to his, room, as she would say this. So, kid, as he would say this, yeah, as he would say this, or she in this case, are you pretty much happy about this? I mean, you definitely don't feel like you're, ready to be married by, the number one villain of Japan. As he would say this, well, I was forced into it. As she would say this, it sounds like an arranged marriage, but it's more like the person in the situation would basically like to do it, but As Izuku would say this. Yeah. As she would say this. Anyway, good luck, kid. And if you decide to become a father or anything of that sort, maybe call me, auntie now. Or at least the children auntie. As he would say this. I I guess. As she would say this. Anyway, bye. She would basically start to leave. As she would basically, see that Izuku is basically going onto his bed. So, Izuku would just be on his bed, basically, thinking in his mind, I just hope my friends, Bako and Ida, I just hope they're safe. As Izuku would basically start to clench his fist, as he would see, all for one basically coming out of coming into the room, as she would say this, hello there, my lovely little husband. My husband to be, at least. As Izuku would say this, oh, hi, honey. As she would say this, well then, Izuku. As she would basically, grab Izuku by his chin, as she would say this, I hope you're ready because next month, we're finally gonna get married. She would basically start to feel super happy as her eyes would start to become, well, a little bit, yandere-ish. Like the whole, just imagine her having these type of eyes. Yeah, as she would say this. So, I hope you're ready for the wedding, honey. She would basically, basically even more forces Izuku into a more deep kiss, even using her tongue. Izuku would not do that, as she would say this. I swear, if you don't use your tongue, as she would basically, create, how do I say this? Kind of like these, Edward Scissorhand type claws, as she would basically cut into Izuku's skin, as Izuku would start using starts using his tongue now, as she would say this. Good, she would basically say in her mind, as she would basically stop the kiss and basically, pushes Izuku onto the bed. As she would say this. Now, let's do something even more fun. As she would basically start the lovemaking session once again. But I won't be describing it in detail again, so, yeah. So, let's go back to the heroes right now. So, back with the heroes, everybody's basically getting ready, including some of the, Class 1B members, because one of them specifically, a certain, grape-haired bitch over there, aka, the pervert, aka, Merida, basically spilled the beans, about finding a way to basically save Izuku, and including trying to save him from that horrible wedding. And basically in public, or more specifically nearby, the, Class 1B's dorms, and currently somebody, aka, Kendo, basically hearing this, well, she would basically tell everybody in Class 1B about it. Let's just say they decided to basically join in on the fun, to basically save Izuku from this horrible, horrible decision. Maybe. So, yeah. So, it's been about a week, as currently, they basically gotten some, powerful, heroes basically on their side to basically save Izuku from this tragic fate. And Bakugo is basically getting ready, even creating, grenades. I'm not even kidding. She made grenades with her sweat. So, yeah. So, every single, student there would basically start going on these, gigantic ass, biplanes or whatever you want to call them. Basically those, VTOL type planes, and they would basically start to go in them, basically sitting down as they would start to go towards the, towards the island where Izuku and All For One are finally having their wedding. Izuku currently is basically now wearing his, suit, as he's basically waiting for, All For One at the altar. Izuku currently is, kind of empty. Ever since that lovemaking session, Izuku somehow started to feel, how do I say this? Izuku somehow became a little bit of a masochist now. Yeah, thanks All For One. Oh god, I made Izuku to the fucking masochist, goddamn. So, because of this, Izuku now has a tendency to basically, well, hurt himself even more. But thankfully, he's able to regenerate some of his body parts thanks to, thanks to the help of healing runes. Which, well, it still hurts, but he's able to heal himself. So, Izuku is basically now, instead of like, what do you call it exactly? Instead of having a tie or anything of that sort, well, he has a fucking collar. Yeah. Let's just say All For One is a bit kinky. So, when Izuku's basically, waiting for All For One, some of the photographers there, basically, some villain photographers would basically start, taking pictures of Izuku, as some of these villain photographers were basically keeping, some of those photos for themselves. So, some villains from, other villain groups were basically there, basically celebrating, All For One's, wedding. And one of them was, a certain girl, aka by the name of Overhaul, as she would ask to herself, so that's Izuku. The man with the quirk. He's quite pure. She would basically ask herself as she would start to think, I should have, she would basically start to think to herself, I should have gotten married a few years ago. As she would basically, look at Izuku as she would say this. I wonder if All For One is, wondering if she can, have a polygamous marriage with, Izuku. Yeah, this is probably gonna be a hint to next episode if you get what I mean. Oh god. So, as wait for a second. As All For One is basically, getting ready for her, wedding, basically wearing her dress. Well, we go back to Overhaul, as Overhaul is basically looking at Izuku once again, as she would say this. I'm so tired. She would basically say to herself, as she would basically look back and see, Eri acting like the, what do you actually call it? I don't know what to really call it, but let me just check. So, they would basically see Eri there, basically now. Unlike in, canon, All For One, she's actually a mother, or at least, a surrogate mother to, Eri. Because Eri in this timeline, she's actually okay with, All For One basically, acting like she is. Like, basically, trying to basically get, quirk canceling, bullets. But thankfully, she's not, being tortured and being forced to basically get revived by her. So yeah, at least they have a somewhat good relationship. So, Eri is basically like the flower girl and basically started scattering several like petals there. As when the doors open, Izuku would see All For One. All For One is basically wearing a pure white dress, as instead of her, regular old mask, she's now wearing nothing. She's basically, now showing her, little scar on her face. As some of the, villains were kind of jealous of her basically, marrying, Izuku. After a while of basically walking, she would basically hear the bells toll, as she would basically go on the, altar. As a priest would basically arrive, being forced to do this at gunpoint. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. Like a villain basically just is wielding a gun wielding a gun at his fucking head. And this villain is basically like a gun villain. So he would basically say typical priest things about Izuku marrying, All For One, blah blah blah. And currently the heroes have finally arrived and are basically, going in, stealth wise. So some of the stealthy heroes basically started going in as Hokakure would basically report on, Izuku currently now, starting the wedding. And oh boy, let's just say some of the girls in Class 1A and Class 1B, except for, for Izumi, because for obvious reasons, they would start become pissed, as they would basically can't wait to basically beat down on All For One for basically daring to marry Izuku off to herself. So, yeah. So, when Ida hears this, Ida would also become a little bit mad and starts becoming rational, basically asking to herself, actually, I'm okay with basically beating down an old woman. So, after saying that, everybody would start to look at her, as one of them would say this, specifically, Bako. Did I influence her or something? She would basically ask to herself. Oh, god damn it. Wait for a second. As currently, Tamaki being, a girl with the ability to basically eat anything and gain their powers, well, she was forced to basically eat a chameleon. I'm not even kidding. She was forced to eat a chameleon. And so she was basically invisible and started listening on to, Izuku basically forced her being married to, 0 for 1. And let's just say, because remember, she's a yandere in this iteration. Oh boy. Let's just say she's getting ready to, how do I say this? Wheel the knife over to her head and basically start, slice it apart. And she would basically start, she would start to become fuming. Actually, almost all of them are fuming. Except for, All Might for obvious reasons, because, All for One not really interested in Izuku. Even though I implied it, a few episodes earlier. Sorry, I decided to not do it because, All Might, no. But currently, as the wedding goes on, well, let's just say the villains are basically, excited. Not really excited, more like, hearing about how they're gonna, do what they do. Let's just say that. So, as the wedding was almost coming to an end, well, the priest would say this. How do I say this? Do you, Izuku Midoriya, be together with your lovely One over here, and be a great husband, even through death and sickness. As Izuku would basically say this. I do. As she would be, the priest would basically say that to One, as she would say this. With conviction, she would say, I do, and I will gladly do anything for my little toy. She would basically say that under her breath, as Izuku would clearly hear it, but for the priest, he doesn't hear it at all. And so, he would basically say this. Now, I pronounce you as husband, and as the doors would basically open, as some of the heroes would basically arrive, as they would say this. Alright, we're stopping this, as one of them, specifically Bakugo, would basically charge over there, as she would say this. I obviously object, as he would basically start creating large explosions, as the villains would basically, get ready their, quirks, as one of them specifically, Ito would basically run up there and basically carry Izuku, well, like bridal style. Like, Izuku's basically like the bride in this point, and, Ito's basically carrying him. As Izuku is being, carried away, well, wait for a second, what's it? As Ito would see the collar on Izuku, as she would say this, what's with the collar? As Izuku would say this, let's just say the ring is not a ring. As she would say this, oh dear. As she would basically look back at All For One, as All For One would basically say this, You ruined my happiest day? As she would basically start using her quirk to basically, create several tentacles, as she would say this, nobody, and I mean nobody, ruins my best day. My wedding, including you. As she would basically look at All Might, as All Might would say this, don't you dare. As she would basically get ready her quirk, as she would say this, oh, I dare. As she would basically start creating her, large tentacles, as they would basically start to fight. As for the priest currently, the priest is starting to escape, as the villain would basically ask herself, this is the weirdest day I ever saw. This is the weirdest job I ever gotten. She would basically ask herself, as she would basically start to leave. So, in the battle, well, let's just say the battle was basically chaotic as all hell. So yeah, just imagine, I can't remember that wedding exactly, but, I remember that, the story in, Reddit, about, this guy basically marrying, this woman that really likes, paintball, and apparently in their wedding, they were they were basically playing, paintball, and just imagine it like that, but with quirks. So yeah, everybody's basically, shooting out, fire-based quirks to ice-based quirks, blah blah blah, as currently, they're basically trying to find a way to basically bring Izuku back. As, one of the villains, specifically, Dabi basically acting as I guess you could say the good man in this, wedding, would basically try and find a way to basically bring Izuku back. She would basically jump in and basically grab Izuku. She would say this, alright kid, she would basically say this, Alright, kid, you can go back with, as she would basically be slammed into the ground by, Todoroki. As Todoroki would basically use her ice and fire-based quirk to basically, bring Izuku back to the hero side. As Izuku would say this, thank you, as she would say this, I'm glad you're okay, Izuku. As she would basically look at Izuku's collar, as she would basically take it off, as she would say this, now, much better. And she would basically, look at Izuku, seeing that he's wearing a suit, as she would say this. You look absolutely nice in that suit. As Izuku would say this. Well, it makes sense. As she would say this. Anyway, as she would basically start to go back into the battlefield, as she would basically, start fighting against some of the villains. As one of the heroes, specifically, like a random hero would basically tell him to basically go into the, VTOL. In the VTOL, we see, what is her name? Seeing Ida there, basically, a bit, worried, as she would see Izuku there, as she would say this, Izuku! As Izuku would say this, Ida, as she would basically, hug Izuku, as she would say this, are you okay? Did, All For One do anything to you? As Izuku would say this, yeah, I guess you could say that. As she would say this, what did she do? What did she, as she would see, some of the, bruises and some of the, hickeys that he gone, as she would say this, don't tell me. As Izuku would say this, yeah, she, as she would basically start to be fuming, as she would say this, basically, getting out of that rage. Wait, do you have enough mana, or anything of that sort? As she would basically look at Izuku, as he would say this, well, I'm a bit tired, and I was a bit weakened, so I couldn't use any of my noble phantasms. So, as she would say this, oh, as she would basically, look at Izuku, as she would say this, Izuku, I want you to lean a little bit closer to me. As Izuku would say this, sure, but what? Well, as Ida would basically, grab onto Izuku's, face, as she would basically kiss him. After doing that, Izuku would gain some of his mana back. As Izuku would say this, well, I guess I feel much more better. As Izuku would basically take off the, coat, as he's mostly wearing a blazer now. As she would say this, now, Izuku, I want you to rest here. Let us fight. I mean, you basically sacrificed yourself. As Izuku would say this, what do you mean? As she would say this, well, Hax told me about your reason why you decided to marry her. As Izuku would say this, oh, yeah. As she would say this, don't worry, I'm not mad. I'm just mad at her. We're trying to steal you away. As Izuku would say this, I guess. As she would say this, now, you should go rest. Just take a sleep. Or just go to sleep. As Izuku would basically, see that, Ida would start to leave and basically going back into the battlefield. So yeah, as everybody, like every single villain and hero are basically fighting, All For One is basically raging that everybody is basically ruining her wedding, her happiest day. Her happiest day between, her and Izuku. And they basically stole it away, as All For One would be even more pissed, seeing that, Izuku was brought back to the hero side, as she would basically, call upon several Nomus to basically try and fight them off. As All For One would say this, I don't care. I don't care. Kill all of those heroes. I want them to suffer for daring to ruin my happiest day. She would basically say that, as several of the Nomus would basically charge and basically beating down some of the heroes. As All Might would basically get ready to, she would basically, twist her body as she would scream out, Detroit, smash! As she would basically create a large, crater where all of the Nomus basically stand. And the Nomus are basically destroyed, as All For One is basically fuming, as she would basically use several of her quirks to create this large air cannon-like arm, as she would basically say this, You ruined it! As she would basically start shooting out pressurized air at All For One. Not All For One, I meant All Might. As All Might would basically do the same thing, but with her, her, fists. So, currently, some of the heroes and some of the villains are basically watching this large scale battle. Sorry about that. And currently, well, the news helicopters were basically, um, um, broadcasting this as everybody's basically hearing what they're saying. Saying that, wait for a second. Oh, for one was basically saying that, it's her fault for basically ruining her happiest day with Izuku, as she would basically say that it's her fault for basically, trying to force Izuku into a marriage that he didn't, ask for. So the general consensus, how do I say this? The general consist, well, let me just, general consensus, they're basically thinking in their minds, I don't know if I'm watching a soap opera or large-scale battle, they would basically ask to themselves, as some of the media currently are basically wondering if, All Might is, let's just say a pedo, because, the way she's saying it, it sounded like, All Might is basically, wanting Izuku, even though she doesn't really like Izuku that way. It's more like, a motherly type way than anything else. But some of the heroes nearby are basically cheering her on, and some of the Class 1A and Class 1B members are basically telling her to basically win so they can, get back with Izuku. As, everybody would basically hear this on the broadcast, as currently a certain, Inko Midoriya is basically watching this, seeing her daughter basically, fighting against, some villains as she's basically cheering her on. Until she heard that Izuku's still alive. Yeah, let's just say she's basically wondering, so Izuku's still alive. He's still alive. She would basically start to cry as she was basically wondering if Izumi already knows about Izuku still being alive. As, she would basically ask, wait, if Izuku's alive, then how did he... As she would basically start to look at the, VTOL, or more specifically, the cameras are basically facing at the VTOL, seeing that Izuku is basically okay. But, sorry about that, as Inka would see that he now has, somewhat bluish hair now, basically accented with his used to be, green hair. As she would say to herself, wait, what happened to my baby? She would basically say that, as Izuku currently is basically on the sidelines, basically wondering to himself, why am I being forced to do this? As currently, Kukulane is basically asking him about, him being protected by several girls, as Izuku would say this. Well, I don't really know how to feel about that. As, Jack would basically come out, as he would say this. It seems that you have a large harem, Izuku. Hey, I wonder if you might get a lot of children from that. As he would start to laugh, as Izuku would basically tell him to not talk about it. And, currently, Lancelot there, now able to somewhat think, is now saying to himself, damn, that kid's lucky. But I prefer older women, more specifically. If you don't get that, little reference, or at least that little, joke there, well, if you don't remember, Lancelot was basically the downfall of King Arthur, because, he was basically the one that basically, kind of cucked King Arthur's wife. So yeah, let's just say King Arthur was Netararen. Yeah, that's basically the simplified version of that. So, after basically saying that to himself, he would basically look at every single hero there, or more specifically the pro heroes, as he would say to himself, damn, they look good. As he would start to think in his mind, yep, my vessel's definitely gonna have a great time. Especially with the 0-for-1 chick, as he would basically start to think, maybe, as he would start to think in his mind, thinking that if he were to marry all of those women, well, he should probably get, how do I say this? Get an extra monopool in case of him basically, in case his, pelvis isn't moving anymore, if you get what I mean. So, the battle was basically fierce as one stood on top of All For One, and that person was All Might. Everybody's basically cheering on All Might as All Might would All Might would basically defeat All For One. as they would basically start to capture all of the, League of Villains members, including Shigaraki. But currently, the, doctor, aka, Dr. something, I can't remember his name, or in this case, her name. Yeah, so, after basically capturing all of the villains, they would basically bring them into a specific, VTOL for mostly villains. And so, they would basically bring Izuku back towards, the main island of Japan, or more specifically, back to UA. And the news helicopter, basically seeing all of this, would basically report back to the, news station. And it's not helping that it was live and basically broadcasted to, broadcasted to, the whole, whole of Japan. So, yeah. So, after that, a certain girl by the name of, Inka Midoriya would basically, plan on going back to, maybe basically planning to go to, UA to basically confront, Izumi and also see Izuku once again. So yeah, so we go to Inko basically, packing all of her things, as she would basically start to, grab her bags, as she would start moving towards where Izumi and also Izuku basically resided on. AKA, wait for a second, UA. So, yeah, I'm probably going to be leaving this episode right here. And so, this is going to be the end of this episode. And so, I hope you liked the video, comment, and subscribe. And I hope to see you guys next time. Bye-bye!